Hey guys, Mr. Jodrick here with a new type of video. In this video series, I'm going to start making dioramas. I've been inspired by people like Boylai Hobby Time, North of the Border, Studson Studio, and a bunch of others that I probably won't even remember to name. But over the last few years, I've been improving my clay modeling skills as well as using some of my 3D printing skills as well. The only other diorama I've made is the Jurassic Park Stegosaurus diorama, as you can see on the screen. It was my first time cracking at a diorama and it was really fun. There were some things that went wrong and some things that went right. I'll do a future video for it later. This time, I want to go ahead and make a Giganotosaurus diorama. Why a Giganotosaurus? Well, 1. Dinosaurs are cool. 2. They're not humans and humans are hard to make. And 3. It was a present for a friend and it just happened to be his favorite dinosaur. So yeah, you're going to see the process of me making something over the course of 4 months. Definitely a passion project. Before I get into the actual making of the diorama, let me tell you some of the stuff you'll need. White Sculpey clay. I bought about 3 pounds worth of it. Clay sculpting tools. You can use your fingers, which is definitely something I did, but you definitely need some tools for the fine details. Clear JB Weld. This is to make things in the diorama stick to each other. You can also use super glue for smaller things, but I would seriously suggest getting JB Weld. UV resin and a UV flashlight. This is for smaller details like patches of water that I didn't use, or eyeball reflections, or making a mouth look like it's wet. Just something to really bring it to the next level. A matte clear varnish spray paint. This is so that when you're done painting, because you will be painting, you're going to be spraying the whole thing with it so that it seals the paint and protects it from the elements, whether it's dust or wind or hopefully not rain. I don't think you want to put your dioramas out in the rain, but yeah. Painter's tape so that you can mask off different areas. If you know anything about painting, that's kind of essential so that you don't mix paints accidentally. And of course, you want your acrylic paints. You can use other things like gouache or watercolor if you're crazy, but I personally use the brand Folk Art. Not a sponsor or anything, I just really like them. I've used them before for other projects. Check it out. You can find them at Michael's. 4 years of art school. Whoops, that's not required, but I did it anyways. Paintbrushes. You're going to want small, fine-tipped ones for those small details, and then medium-sized ones for the larger covered areas. Something to mix your paints on. I used spare paper plates I had lying around, but you can use a painting palette, whatever you want, as long as you just kind of contain the mess. Something to clean your brushes with. I did an old plastic cup with water in it. Something to dry your brushes with. Either paper towels or a rag will do. You want to get your brushes clean of paint and then dry before you go to the next color, unless you're wet blending or dry brushing, whatever you're going to be doing. XPS foam boards. These are important for the base. The base is what your things will be viewed on and what you're usually like the environment that the thing that the diorama is built out of. A hobby knife. This will be used to carve the base. Because, you know, unless you want just a perfect square, which you can do, I would suggest getting a hobby knife so that you can shape things the way you need it. Because you can also use spare pieces of foam in the diorama, which I'll talk about later. Sprue cutters. You're going to need those for cutting sprues. Surprise, surprise. That was used in the Jeep that I'm about to mention. And for this particular diorama, you're going to want to get a Jeep model. This one's not something you need to buy. You can just go into your backyard. It's a rock. One that fits comfortably in your hand. You'll use it for texturing. And of course, imagination. Each sold separately. Again, links for most of these in the description. Now that you know what you need, let's get into the actual build. First, I started with assembling the Jeep. All you do is you cut the parts out of the part holders, I don't know what they're called, and then you basically just put them together like the instructions say, as you can see here, and then eventually you get to the final product. You might come into some snags, like as you can see here, I needed to use super glue and some rubber bands to make this part hold together. Don't know if the mold was injected improperly or what, but yeah, I just kind of went at it and made it work. After you've assembled it, you gotta paint it. I used spray paint. I did not spray paint those tiny little headlights as you can see, because, you know, that would look bad. I took them out, then spray painted it, put it back together. Next step is accidentally hitting it with a hammer. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't an accident. I wanted to break it. And you'll see why later. After that, you paint those parts that are showing white, because obviously you don't want that. Glue it back together into some kind of way, and then you continue painting. I didn't take a whole lot of pictures, so I'm sorry for that, but here's what it looked like at one stage of the painting after I'd done the complete black. I did the base as a tan color. the windshield area with the red as well as the tires. After that, I did fine details. As you can see, I added the red stripes, I added the numbering on the side, on the top, as well as the lettering, and then I took that glass pane, cut it in half, used UV resin, and I put it right on top so that it gave it that broken look. After that, I added brown paint to give it some weathering. You'll see why later. But for now, here's a quick turnaround of the Jeep. I'm going to do this at roughly every few stages of this process. Now the Jeep is done, we're going to focus on the Giganotosaurus. I went into the game Jurassic World Evolution 2. Really fun game, by the way. You guys should check it out if you like dinosaurs. We're also park builders. Then I took a picture of a Jeep next to the Giganotosaurus, and then I did 1 Jeep, 2 Jeep, 3 Jeep to figure out how tall this sucker is going to be. You can see that here demonstrated with the ruler, my hand, and the Jeep. I forgot to mention earlier, but you're going to need some flexible metal wire and some aluminum foil. Ignoring the blurry Photoshop on these photos, this is step 1 of making your dinosaur. I roughed out the length of the body, about where I wanted the legs and arms, and then I wrapped it around with aluminum foil. This is the skeleton. After that, I saw how it looked on top of the Jeep, roughly where I want it to go. I added some more aluminum to give it more of a real dinosaur body, so that I could start adding clay. This is what it looked like after I added just the first layer of clay. No baking yet. You will need to bake things, so if you don't have an oven, I don't know what to tell you, because that's how you lock the clay in. Skipping ahead, here's some of the details. As you can see, I started bulking out the muscles, giving it a mouth, and also feet and hands. The little holes on the fingers and on the toes are for later, for when I put in the clay claws. In this shot, you can see I added an eyeball, I bulked out the muscles some more, and I added the claws to the feet and to the hands. To make these claws, all you do is you take a small worm of clay, or as Adam would call it, a wormy dealy, cut off a little bit, and then make it into like a cylindrical triangle, the tooth shape, look at dinosaur teeth, you can figure it out. And then I baked about 40 of them. It was probably one of the most arduous things, making all those tiny things. The thing in the top left corner there is the tongue that I made. I basically just took a noodle of clay, I made it fatter, I rolled it into roughly a tongue shape, I used some of my tools to make marks on the tongue that you won't really see, but the detail won't kill anything. And then I popped it all in the oven. When you're baking Sculpey in the oven, follow the directions of the clay package. After that, I stuck the tongue and all the teeth in place, and now he's a smiling guy. Skipping ahead, here's the Giga after adding much more detail. As you can see, there's a significant brow above his eye, and I've added lots and lots of spikes. I did that by adding a worm of clay down his backside, and then pulling it up with my fingers to make the spikes, and then shaping them precisely with tools and with my fingers. Once you've finished with buffing out all the muscles, figuring out where you want the muscles to be, how you want it to shape, using reference photos, then you got to do the hard part. You've got to make all the scales. It's not super hard. What you do is you take a texture roller. To make a texture roller, you take a cylinder of clay, and then you poke a bunch of holes in it of varying sizes depending on what sizes you want for your scales. This creates a negative texture, so when you roll it across the clay, it creates the opposite of holes, which is raised bumps, aka scales. You do need to bake the clay texture roller, otherwise it won't do anything. Just a heads up. Here's some more shots of the finer details. I think it came out pretty well. And yeah, you will encounter problems. For example, my Giganotosaurus, his feet broke like 3 times. To fix this, I jammed metal rods into his feet, got some of that JB Weld, and glued it back together. It's not always going to be the most seamless thing, but with more clay and some dedication, you can try and make it as seamless as possible if you come into these kind of mistakes. Before we get on to painting, here's a quick turnaround. Now that the Jeep is done and the dinosaur is sculpted, we have to focus on painting the dinosaur. For the paint scheme, I use a mix of the official movie render and also these toys because I think it gives it some fun if you add a little bit of inspiration from outside sources to it. In particular, I made him a little more green than what the movie looked like. The first thing I did was I threw down the dark colors. This is all the areas where I plan to have really dark paint showing through. I kept the light undertone on the belly and underside, because most reptiles have that. I used a almost muddy tan color, similar to the Jeep, but a little darker and desaturated, so that it didn't look exactly the same color as the Jeep, because that just doesn't make sense. As you can see, I also painted all the things in the mouth red, and I also added some pink washes, some other things to give it a little bit of color variation. After that, I started adding the green, as you can see here. There's also some touches of gray here and there. I didn't want it to be completely consistent across the whole entire dinosaur. I wanted to have its own scheme. As you can see, there's also some small blood marks to imply that it's been in battles. In reality, these were just stray marks that weren't supposed to be there that I turned into part of the project. This is more or less the final paint job of what it looked like. You can't see it very well now, but you will in a minute. Remember this base I told you guys about before? Well, I didn't just leave it pink like that. I kept the back end more square, and I tapered off the front end to be more of an organic, natural earth shape. I used some of my excess XPS foam and my knife to shape the rocks and the boulders. I then went to town on the whole thing with that handy dandy rock I told you guys earlier to give it more of a real look. To create that lava, I did the same thing. I grabbed extra foam, I glued it together, I slapped it on there. I then used a painter's tape to put down that white line you see. I probably should have painted that white stripe before I put down the lava to make things easier, but hey, you live and learn. To paint the lava flow, I did a base coat of black, and then I did red, and in the center of each flow was orange, yellow, and then white, and it gets smaller as it gets closer to the center so that it looks like it's getting hotter and hotter. I used some red right around the edges to imply that the lava was heating things up. And now the part I'm sure all of you skipped to, the final turnaround. I'm personally really happy with how it came out. I hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. I'll be trying to do more of it, and if you want to see more, feel free to leave me an idea in the comments, and I'll catch you guys later.